When you graph currencies, we always like to use the bottom rule. And the bottom rule is pretty simple. You start off with the currency that you're going to graph, you write that at the bottom. So for example, say we're going to graph the peso. If peso is on the bottom here, it's got to be on the bottom everywhere else. So for the quantity, because this is going to be a regular price quantity market, it's going to be the quantity of pesos. And for the price, it's going to be some other currency. In this case, we're going to put the dollar over the peso. So that's the bottom rule. If it's on the bottom here, meaning if that's the currency that we're looking at, then it's going to be the quantity of that currency, and it's going to be the amount of the other currency per the one that we're looking at. So peso is on the bottom here, here, and here. When we graph currencies, we always graph one currency in terms of another currency because we trade one currency for another currency. So anytime you deal with currency values, you're going to have two graphs. In this case, I have one for dollars and one for euros. When we follow the bottom rule on this, we are going to do the quantity of dollars on the bottom here, and it's going to be the price of dollars in terms of euros, so dollars will be on the bottom here. In other words, we're saying X number of euros per dollar. On this side, it's going to be the quantity of euros versus the price of euros, which is going to be expressed in dollars. So here it's X number of dollars per euro. Having set up our graphs, we can now move on to the supply and demand for currencies. Supply and demand looks just like any other supply and demand curve, so that part really doesn't give us a whole lot of difficulty. But when we add in the quantities and prices, we need to be careful. So you can put any quantity in here, and we'll just call it Q1. And so we also have a quantity for euros, which we're also going to call Q1. The prices are going to be significant, though, because they have to be reciprocals. Remember that euros are traded for dollars and dollars are traded for euros. So if we come over here and we say that it's 2 euros per dollar, or in other words, you could just say 2E to have a price. These are going to be the same. Then over here, it's going to be $1 to each 2 euros. In other words, 50 cents equals 1 euro. So these are our prices. Again, it's euros per dollar, dollars per euro. Suppose the value of a currency changes. In our example here, we start off by saying that 2 euros equals $1. Now suppose that the demand for dollars goes up for some reason. We have an increase in the demand for dollars. Now, one thing that you always know is that when you have a currency graph like this, if the demand curve shifts on one graph, then the supply curve has to shift on the other, and they always shift in the same direction. So opposite curves will shift, but they always shift in the same direction. In other words, if the price of the dollar is going up, then the price of the euro must be going down. In this case, the price of the dollar has gone up. We go from 2/1, or 2 euros per dollar. Now let's just say that we have 3 euros per dollar. Over here, instead of having 1/2, we now have to go down to 1/3. Or in other words, 33 cents